This special segment. It's a bonus segment of Self-Sabotaging Sagas, but in this bonus segment of what is CPTSD and do I have it, we are talking again with Russ Germain, and we are going to, he and I did a little bit of work after our session. We did some work on his parts, on some integrating some of his parts that have been causing him some trouble in his life. And we're going to talk about how that work went and the results. And yeah, that's it. So we did our first session. We ended up doing 2 sessions. Sometimes
Right.
when people have a fair amount of trauma in their life, right? And CPTSD is this kind of repetitive trauma that happens. And sometimes it takes more than one session to break the parts all the way through to where we ultimately want to get them. And we also had to do some bargaining with the parts. So, Russ, why don't
Yes.
you tell us a little bit? Okay, so we worked on the part of you that can't be alone, that feels super triggered if you were going to be left alone. What do you want to share a little bit about that part of
Sure.
yourself? Yeah.
This part was well. It's part of me that was born earlier in my life, of course, and the way it came to be was being not willing to being abandoned, being alone due to like well being how could I put this not having someone in your life that you love and them being afraid that they're going to walk away or leave you,
Right.
and ultimately the fear, the root of is not wanting to. I don't want to be alone. My part gets triggered whenever there's a potential like a trigger of the thought of I'm going to be alone. I've if I do this, if I say these words, or make this sort of decision, or if I get into trouble with my girlfriend, or even if it doesn't necessarily be her, but if I get into trouble and it causes her to be angry, there is this there's that possibility or that likelihood that she's going to leave, and
Right.
I'm going to be abandoned. I'm going to be alone.
Okay.
So this part's been around for a long time, and being in a relationship now and dealing with the CPTSD that I have and my parts, when anytime an argument or a fight occurs, or if I do something that like frustrates her or annoys her, and due to a lot of little issues that I have going on in my life, that is a frequent occurrence. It My part will get triggered, and I end up having a difficult time maintaining the adults in our conversation, or when we're trying to resolve the problem. And this
Right.
part comes up, and all he wants to do is like give in or try to accommodate or try to bargain,
Yeah.
do whatever it can to avoid the possibility of being alone.
Right. And I think a lot of people can relate. Like, I think knowing that the work that we did, I know how deep the boundaries were. We cut through a lot of boundaries with this part. And a lot of people have a similar part that fears being alone, fears being abandoned. They might people please or bend to accommodate, do all of those things. I think in my experience, it's a pretty common part to have. And this part for you was so buried in fear that
Yes,
it
exactly.
really dramatically affected your life, maybe more than a lot of people. So
Yeah.
yeah, when we worked on that, when I asked you, like, what what happens if you are alone, that fear, and you had said that it feels like it would be a fate worse than dying. So that's a perspective of how like really big this part is. And would you say how many times a week normally would this part get triggered before we did the work?
It was daily, and it was
Daily.
probably multiple times at worst, because I'd have days where the right in the beginning of the day, I would get that part would get triggered, and I'd be experiencing and blending with this part, and I'd be like literally freaking out and afraid of doing anything that could possibly make the reality of being alone happen.
Right.
And everything I did in that time would is to the point of worrying of what do I say, well, how do I do, or what do I do in this situation, or like it I'd literally get stuck, or I would
Yeah.
freeze without, because of the fact that it was so strong, that it felt that the safest thing for it to do was to just do nothing,
Right.
because no matter what it felt like, no matter what I could say, there'd be potential for it to make it worse, or like
Right.
the situation it's involved in.
Yeah. And it's the part is like so stuck in fear. It's, when we're stuck in fear, especially from with a part of us that's operating and running the show in the moment, that was born when we were young. I mean, the resources are so small. It's like fight, flight, freeze, fawn.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of resources when you're 2 or 3 years old. And these
No.
parts, when they are activated, you are literally like operating from the part and stuck with the resources you had when you were young. So
Yeah. Exactly.
you said that on a scale of 1 to 10 in the past, that this part, usually the trigger was usually an 8, sometimes higher.
Right. That's
Right.
right. Yeah. It was pretty
Yeah.
intense.
And so the first session that we did, it was a pretty long session, and we
Yeah.
worked with this part and its opposite part. So we always work with the part that's causing the problem and then the part that it's most in conflict with. And I do this because sometimes, we have these parts and they're trying to like fight against each other, trying to create balance in your life. There's like a polarity here. And sometimes if we just work on the one part, then there's a big like pendulum I can't even talk today.
Swing.
A
Yes.
pendulum swing. And so we want to work with both of the parts. And so your opposite part was the part that, let me look at my notes, the part, the
He wanted to
child
be
with no
free and
fear.
have fun. Yeah.
Yes, it was the child with no fear wanting to be free and having fun. And so
Exactly.
we worked with the two parts and we did a lot of deep work. We broke the part through both parts, actually, through quite a few boundaries. I lost count, but the
Yeah.
boundaries, for those of you that are listening and watching, is there's a place that the part only knows exists, and it's operating sort of in this place. Like, imagine if you're locked in a room and you never knew that there was an outside, and the room has no windows and no doors, and this is your whole world. I imagine this is how indoor cats feel.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the room is their whole world. They don't know that there's a whole world outside of it. And so when we work with the parts, we break them through one of these boundaries, and then they're exposed to a whole new world. And often what I'm trying to do with the parts work, I'm trying to get them out of the fear place and into a place of expansion. So we broke through multiple boundaries, but each one was still in a little place of fear, trying to prevent something, trying to do something. So it opened up a bigger world each time. And would you say that was
Yeah.
your experience, that each time we broke through it opened up a like more possibility?
Yeah. Absolutely. It felt like the room getting bigger, right? Like, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is an excellent way of putting it.
And then And then we got to a point where, okay, we're sort of, I could feel, because this is a lot of work on the brain. It literally feels like, when you lift weights, you're contracting your muscles.
Yeah.
It feels like your brain is lifting weights when you're breaking through these boundaries. It's
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
intense. It's big work. And so there was this place where it was sort of a good stopping point, and we talked to the parts, and I asked if they wanted to integrate, but one of your parts said no because it didn't have enough trust with you yet. Do you want to
Yeah,
share a little
exactly.
bit about that?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work, and I've had a lot of situations where, due to the trauma and the triggers that were occurring, and I guess lack of knowledge about what's happening, I was often like, I wasn't being, if you want to put it, kind to my part. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was the ability to gain, to have that part trust me, was still healing. Like, I had a lot of work that was left to do, and it it wasn't there yet. Like, I needed to do a ton of work in order for that part to be willing to and open to trust me, because if it doesn't trust me, there's no way I can possibly convince it, or say, ask it to do anything
Mm-hmm.
except maybe listen to me. But it's not gonna, that's about as far as you get. And
Right.
it's just like any other person, right? Like, it's, if you want that person to trust them, they're not gonna trust you that very first day, unless you have extremely great chemistry, right? It's pretty rare. That's pretty rare. So yeah, it takes a couple times to gain trust. And it's unfortunate at that time that it wasn't there yet. But with the work that I did after, and the repeated processing, with me in that part, it
Yeah.
was willing to do it later. So,
Yeah.
and that's just the reality of this. So
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, even though we didn't get to that place that I was ultimately going for in that first session, we did
yeah.
have remarkable results. So we made oh you made I can't say we. I helped broker the deal. Oh,
Yeah.
you made an agreement with the part to do some particular work to build trust for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You were going to do it 5 days a week for 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
you honored that agreement. And in the
Hmm.
course of those 2 weeks, while the work integrated, when we met 2 weeks later, you said that there was 35 to 40% of the time when something would normally trigger that part, you had no reaction at all.
Correct. Yeah.
And
There was
then,
better
yeah,
trust built. Yeah.
yeah. And so when like somebody would draw a boundary, which would normally spark up that fear, 40%, 35 to 40% of the time, you did not have a reaction at all. So that in itself is really powerful. And here's
Yeah.
the other piece of it. The rest of that 60 to 65%, when you did have a reaction, it was at a level 4 or lower,
Correct.
coming
Yes.
from all the reactions, being at a level 8 or higher, moving down to level 0 to 4 is a big, huge shift in just that piece, that big piece of work that we did.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's amazing how, even for myself, feeling it. Like, I I had been doing a lot of work, and there was struggle, and it just felt like I was getting nowhere, right? Like, no
Right.
matter what I would do, it just seems like I couldn't get very far. And then when we did this session, right? Like, even after the second one, when we were going further, I could
We'll talk
tell.
about that in a second.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
even
like,
know yet. You haven't even. So it's going to
I
be a
know.
surprise for me too.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Yeah, it was like the ability to, like, first off, noticing, even if there was a trigger, noticing that something's going on, like that I'm feeling a little different. I'm feeling kind of, unusual, but it didn't jump out and take over, because I could,
Mm-hmm.
they're the things that would I would normally have happen, or like what I would say or how I would behave, they wouldn't happen. Like, I was sitting there going, okay, I'm noticing there's kind of some odd physical feeling, or something that's not right happening, but I was able to maintain an unblended state and not allow the part to be in control.
Right.
And it was pretty obvious. Like, it wasn't a mystery. Like, like, I wasn't sitting there going, is this happening, or am
Mm.
I? It was very clear, and it was amazing. Like, the breakthrough, and the level of control that I had, or have, when it occurs, is it's pretty straightforward. There's no real mystery, right?
Yeah. So now I'm curious. I waited. I didn't ask you about this when we jumped
Yeah.
on because I wanted to be a surprise for me too. So after we did 2 weeks later, we did another session, and that was a week ago now. So we did the other session and we broke the part out of fear into that place, that wider, more expansive place. And the part was ready to integrate, both parts integrated, and they came home to the whole.
Yeah.
So what have you noticed has shifted, or what have you noticed is different since then?
Oh, the it's the level of control.
Mm.
It's knowing what's happening, like seeing it and feeling it, like, just knowing that I'm in control, right?
Oh,
Like, not having that fear, like, not going and sitting there going, oh my god, I can't do this, I don't want to leave the room, I don't want to, I'm afraid to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and hopefully it'll all go away.
right.
That wasn't happening. It was, I
Mm.
would sit there and I could feel it. I could feel that feeling. But I was able, like I said, I was able to keep control, and I was able to think more logically, more rationally, and
So you were
not
able,
have the, yeah.
it sounds like you were able to choose how you wanted to respond instead of
Correct.
just reacting.
Yeah, I think the biggest, like, the most important, or the biggest thing, if, like, as an example, was if there'd be if something wasn't right, and there was an argument, the ability to, when she would set a boundary, right? She'd establish her boundary and say, I need you to go because we're having difficulties. That I In the past, it would literally just either never happen. Like, I wouldn't go because I was too scared, and I would sit there and try to bargain, or try to plead my case, which obviously is this part going, no, 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 I don't want to do this.
Right.
Where I'd be able to go, and, like, I wouldn't feel that fear once I got up and I'd walk out the door, or walk and take a break, right? Like, take 10 minutes, take
Right.
20 minutes to calm down. It felt easy. It felt like it wasn't a difficult process.
Yeah.
And I felt clear, like my mind, well, as clear as it can be with the way I am, but still, like, it felt much clearer, and way less stress, right? Like,
Yeah.
the levels of everything are just lower, much lower.
Yeah. Well, and And I want to note, because this is really huge, you were able to do this in the midst of an argument.
Yeah.
So in the midst of an argument, when usually many emotions are flying around and often more than one part is like coming up to play, either fight back or whatever it might be, but you were able to actually have some level of control and calmness and clarity in within yourself in
Yeah.
under those circumstances. That is,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say it. It's powerful as fuck.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Like I'm a very realistic person, right? I don't jump ahead and go, I'm cured. Oh my God, I'm never going
Right.
to experience a trigger again. And at the same time, I don't go, oh, I don't know. I don't think this is, doubting and thinking like I I have a very realistic attitude and thought about it, and to see it first, like, well, obviously see it firsthand, to experience the difference is incredible. Like,
Yeah.
I know I've like, okay, I admit there's a lot of work ahead. This isn't going to be the end of getting triggered. This isn't going to be the end of having
Right. It's just one part of
fear.
two
But
parts that we
yeah,
worked on. Yeah. There's other stuff going on.
yeah,
It's part of why I typically work with people for 6 months, so we can really do a big shift overall and check to make sure that we're working with the right parts that are causing the problems. And we really
yeah,
got down to a root cause part, which is my
absolutely.
favorite because it filters out into everything in such a powerful way. And in everybody that's listening, this is why I do what I do, because allowing people to have more control and choose how they're moving through the world, when we operate from who we truly are, and our triggers are not who we are, when we operate from who we really are, that's when we're the most powerful. It's when we're the most effective, and when we can create the most joy in our life. And that's why I do what I do. I was there. I was triggered all the time. I had some really powerful parts that were like, hold it all together. Nobody ever knew what was going on, because that part was one of the most powerful parts of me. But
Yeah.
inside, it was like fireworks. So it's, I'm so happy that you have one piece, one little area of your life that you have more control. It makes me feel so good for you and so happy.
Well, thanks.
Oh,
That's awesome. That's good to hear.
yeah.
Yeah, the other thing, and that's really interesting.
Hmm.
We didn't even work with this other part that I have that is, well, has been a big issue with me, right? Like, I have this other part that's really strong is an anxiety part. And it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing when we did our session and even the follow up, the it really allowed me to have a much broader and more thorough understanding of that part. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing how doing that work with those other with the my part of being a fearing of being alone, and then this other part who wants to have fun and be free and just, no care in the world,
Yeah.
that the understanding of this their past and how they are, and then when we broke through all the boundaries that we were working on, the ability to understand where this other part comes from, and
Mm.
it gave me a much bigger understanding and appreciation for it, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of work, and just in that time frame, the amount of work that I've done, and the amount of trust that I've gained, like, from with this part, and the clarity that I've gotten just because of it, is as was so much faster and so much more thorough. And I honestly don't think I would have been able to if it hadn't been for the session, because it really opened up my understanding of everything, and
Right.
those parts specifically as well. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that I've noticed in my clients and myself, because I do the work on myself, is the more parts that you clear out, especially when you get to those really base level ones that are filtering into all aspects of life, these root
Yeah.
causes, it begins to be real easy to see what's going on with the other stuff. Something comes up and you can catch it much quicker. You can be like, you might still slide into the trigger, but man, you were like, wait, where did that come from? Like, because there's not
Yeah.
as much noise as you become more and more integrated, the parts become more and more integrated. You will literally have, like, it'll be so easy to spot stuff that's happening that you wouldn't have even seen before, because as you become more and more whole. And the other piece too is I sometimes will find a part and I'll notice a part and I'm just like, oh, man, I mean, I don't want to do this part today. I don't want to integrate this part today because, the I don't want to drink as much water as I need to drink. I don't want to get a little extra sleep, because all that stuff helps the integration. And then the
Yeah.
part will be like, no, but I want to come home too. I'm like, and it's like a
Yeah.
little kid version of you, and you just can't help but like want to scoop it up and be like, okay. And then I'll take it home, because over time they get to see the other parts come home and they're like, oh, I see how that like did something really good. And it's so powerful. I love it so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely. I know.
Cool.
I'm getting to a point now in my life with the CPTSD and with the processing where there is better awareness. There's better like understanding, and there's better ability to do the work, right?
Yeah.
Like in at the beginning, it was I probably would have had a better chance of rebuilding an engine than processing, because there was such a lack of understanding, a lack of knowing where this was coming from, even getting to
Right.
the root of it all. Right? I
Yeah.
had no idea. I didn't know. Like you when you get there, then you start to have a better understanding, and then you can actually do the processing and do the work. And like I actually said in one of my episodes, you don't necessarily ever get you never finish. Like you may heal a lot of your, like and integrate with your parts are a lot of most of the time, but there's always that chance that there could be some other part that comes by, and then you got to do it all.
Mhm.
And the more you do it, the your experience plays into it so fast, and it makes it seem so much easier, and so much, you know the ability to connect with that part
Yeah.
and understand it and learn from it, and go, this is it's a new part. I'm excited. I feel encouraged. It's different than going, oh my god, there's another part, I'm scared on my mind. Like, what the heck? Like, what
Right.
are you doing here, right? Like, it's a different attitude, it's a different way of feeling.
Yeah.
It's incredible how you just know, you're right, you can see it.
Yeah. Well, and the one of the big pieces of this, and this is for everybody listening, if you're not doing like parts work with me or somebody that can do this work, when you discover a new part of you that's maybe triggered or it's creating a behavior, like the part of me that's addicted to sugar or the part of me that's trying to
Yeah.
get love by eating sugar, right? We'll go something a little like less trauma based. But when you discover a part of you that's doing something that you don't like that it's doing, number one and most important, every single part of you has a positive intention for you. Every single one. So
Exactly.
that's the first thing to remember. And you can start by creating a relationship with the part, but based in love. So, like Russ had to build some trust with his part, but you can start that trust now where you start saying, I know that you're working really hard for me. Part of me that does whatever it does, part of me that eats sugar all the time. I know that you want something good for me. I know you're working really hard for me. And I know that you're a part of me and I love you, and really showering that part with love and loving it
Yeah.
because it's a part of you. This is a big piece of self-worth stuff, is we start denying these parts of us. And when we start denying these parts of us, it damages our self-esteem, it damages our self-worth. And
Yeah.
self-worth issues mess with your relationships, they mess with your career, they mess with your ability to receive money, your ability to hang on to anything good without sabotaging it. So all of that stuff. So if you discover a part of you that's doing something you don't like, just love it, you know, accept it and
Yeah.
love it. Like, there's a part of me that lies when I feel scared. I know that that part of me is wants something good for me and it has a good intention and it's been working really hard, and I love you. Just love the parts. And that's the
Yeah.
first base level, and that's the work we did was so deep. And I don't normally, with somebody with your background, I wouldn't necessarily start with parts work because that level of understanding, I would need to lay up quite a bit of groundwork. But because you had already done so much work in connecting and identifying your parts, we were able
Yeah.
to jump in a little bit quicker than other people. So a lot of what I normally do is I clear a lot of the emotional triggers first. And that in itself creates like a big breath of fresh air. It's like, whoa. So you're not feeling, it reduces emotional reactions often by 70% in one session, depending
Wow.
on what the emotion is. So I usually start there and then we do the parts work, because getting the parts out of that fear loop into the expansion place is really what totally rewrites the brain. It's so cool.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's true though. You have to do a lot of emotional work because someone who's just discovering that they have, like, if they first get, before they even get diagnosed, right, they're dealing with a lot of emotion and a lot of fear and a lot of anger and a lot of sadness and all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of feelings that are
Yeah,
in there. And then you get diagnosed and you go to and if you're fortunate enough to be able to get help, you you soon learn that it is, if you don't do work with your emotions and you don't, like you said, emotional work, you're gonna have a difficult time connecting, especially if you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling angry with yourself,
mm-hmm.
or you're feeling, like you sit there and you're blaming yourself for what happened, and you're inadvertently, you could be, without even knowing it, blaming or making a part feel like it's their fault for the way that you were treating, or the way you're acting, or
Right,
and then you sit there and your parts, all of a sudden your parts are going, hey, I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to protect you. You're potentially
right,
in danger here. We're keeping you safe. And you're going and saying, oh, you stupid part, like, thanks a
right.
lot. And if you have to understand and really work with your emotions, and then it makes it so much easier connecting and
Yeah,
and learning about those parts and integrating and getting their trust. And with if you're allowing your emotions to get in to take over, you're going to have a hell of a lot of hard time getting anywhere,
yeah,
because your emotions can take over so easily.
yeah. And well, again, I have jumped straight in with people that have with doing just the parts work, but typically I like to clear the emotions first for most everybody. And it's a big part of why I do that, because a big piece of what's going on with a lot of people is we were not taught how to manage our emotions, and we have these emotional anchors and these triggers in our
Yeah.
nervous system. So by clearing that and neutralizing the emotions, the other work is easier.
Yeah.
And but it's, it's a big part of like why I do the bigger like 6 months things, so I can work with people to really like take care of all of that stuff. And it's
Yeah.
powerful. And it's interesting too, you talk about diagnosis, and I have two of my clients right now definitely have CPTSD. They've never been diagnosed, but the levels of trauma and the type of trauma they had, the repetitive over and over and over.
Yeah.
So, it's not always diagnosis. If you don't get a diagnosis, it's okay. So,
Yeah,
those of you that
exactly.
are listening, if you think that you have CPTSD, you don't need to go out and run and get a diagnosis to start loving the parts of you that are
Exactly.
triggered.
Yeah.
You don't, and that's really important. We don't always have to put a label on what's going on with us, because and sometimes that can be dangerous, because you don't want to become the diagnosis. And that happens a lot of people, because they get to the point where they're like, well, I have this problem, and they don't know who they would be without the problem. And so
Mm.
it inhibits their possibility for healing sometimes, because they've associated and linked their identity to it. So it's always
Yeah.
important, if you do have a diagnosis, to remember that you are so much more than whatever that diagnosis is. It's just it's just a way to organize some symptoms that you have, to
Yeah.
potentially give you greater understanding. And that's what it you want to use it for a tool for greater understanding, but never
Exactly.
think that that's who you are, because you are always so much more than that.
Oh yeah. Knowledge is power, but it doesn't. That's not what's going to ultimately like make you better. Like
Yeah.
if you fall back on that knowledge and you say, yeah, I've got CPTSD and blah, but you never actually do anything, like you don't work with that system, and you don't go and say, okay, I need to, in order for me to feel better, to get better, to have a better chance at a more normal life, I need to heal. I need to
Yeah.
try and work with my system, work with those parts. You have to, and yeah, exactly. You have to get in touch with them, and you have to be in touch with your emotions so that you can love those parts. Because
Yeah.
you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't, you know, deal with it, like love those parts the way that they're meant to be, just like loving your children. If you don't,
Mm-hmm.
you're not really gonna get very far,
Right.
if anywhere, right? You have to do the loving the loving of the parts is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think so. If it's especially like, of course, I know I'm like, oh well, let's just do the work. We could do the work, but in that piece of it, the loving of the parts is something everybody can do. Everybody,
Yeah,
every single one of you out there can do that, and it's such a good place to start. And it's you know it's also important to remember, for whatever reason you have CPTSD, you may have had it, or you may have it, and you may have suffered a lot because of it, or whatever, in that way. But it's really important to know, even though you didn't ask for it, even though you did not deserve it, you have it. And it's up to you to actually do something about it. And I think a lot
exactly.
of people, when they do get the diagnosis, is they just use it, well, I have this, so now I don't have to try anymore. But
Yeah,
just because you have something doesn't mean you get to sit on your butt and do nothing. It's up to you to create the life that you want, the life that you deserve, because you deserve it,
Mm-hmm.
and to actually do something about it. And you can start by loving the parts of you.
Exactly. You have two choices. You can either, say I have it and do nothing and just sit there
Right.
forever until the day you die and hide in the shadows of better experiences and more potential and loving your parts, or you can actually say to myself, okay, I have this diagnosis or I have this trauma, but I'm not going to let it rule my life. I am
Yeah.
going to do whatever it takes so that I can feel better, so that my parts can feel, like that they're not alone, that they're not going to be, no one's ever going to hurt them again, that you're going to
Yeah.
do what you need to do so that everything is, so that they feel loved and they feel protected, and the adult is the one that goes, I'm in charge, this is my life,
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I want to do, not, not let the diagnosis determine it or predetermine my course of action or the way my life goes. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I think that's a good place to wrap this up. I do want to say, Russ, I am very honored and I am so grateful that you let me work with these parts of you and help you to integrate them. It's, uh, I just, I'm very grateful. It
oh, you're
brings
welcome.
me so much joy to watch people break through, and I'm
Yeah.
honored. So, a quick one, those of you that are watching, Russ, you want to tell people, or listening, you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter. My handle is ADHD and CPTSD. I have my show, of course, which is on Apple. It's Living with ADHD and CPTSD, although it's everywhere pretty much. And then if you want to check out my website, living with ADHD and CPTSD.ca, there's resources on there if you're needing some like assistance, or you have questions, or you're feeling lost, or you need help. There's plenty of resources. There's anything you can imagine on there, and then you can get in touch with me. I'm always open to having conversations, talking about anything, pretty much. And I feel that the more we can get in touch with people and talk about, not be afraid to talk about these things, the better we're all going to be. And hopefully in the future, this won't be a difficult thing to do. It'll be as simple as going out and ordering a pizza.
Yeah.
I hope someday.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is the pieces that are actually really working with people have not really been in the mainstream for so long,
Yeah,
and the things that really do work, and so people are starting to branch out and find those things, and so hopefully
yeah,
over the years they'll become more mainstream and people will have more access, and there'll be less maybe fear around it. I think sometimes people, it's like, oh, I don't know anyone that's done this before, so I'm scared. Is it going to work? Do I really want to do it? Who is this
yeah,
like person? Like, for instance, if they were going to work with me, who is this person, Janaea? Is she like, that's why you could
yeah.
watch on my
No kidding.
podcast
Yeah,
and get to know how crazy I really am. No, I'm just
yeah.
kidding.
Like that my sole purpose is not to teach people. I've never, that's never been what I'm there for. I'm there to show people my experiences, what I've done, my
Yeah.
failures, my struggles, and
Yeah.
I want them to not to feel that it isn't something that they have to hide from. You know, sure,
100.
you're gonna be afraid sometimes, and you're gonna kind of not know who to trust or not know who to talk to. But if more people see that these are real experiences, actual situations that occur in a typical life of someone who has CPTSD and ADHD, even then it gives them hope. It gives them a source of encouragement, and chatting with people. And I have done that, chatting with people online about their experiences and what they go through. They actually feel uh, like like weight's been lifted off their shoulders, because
Yeah.
they like having someone that they can talk to about it, and someone who understands them, and someone who's open
Yep.
minded and isn't going to you know dismiss what they're talking about, because I
Right.
have the same experiences, and
Yeah.
so do many other people out there. And
Absolutely.
the funny thing is, there is not a lot of resources out there for CPTSD. It's still relatively new compared to
Yeah.
like many others.
I hadn't even heard of it. And then
Yeah.
when like we started talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely had that. Oh yeah, I know a ton of people that have had that. So
Yeah.
again, there's been a lot of us running around without a diagnosis because there was not a diagnosis
Yeah.
for it, really.
Yeah. Just think, in 10
Yeah.
years from now, there's probably going to be double, maybe triple the amount of people who are going to realize that they too have CPTSD in some form. And
Yeah.
the more it gets out there, the more people are going to realize that this is a reality for them. It's not going to be a small hidden
Yeah.
obscure thing anymore. And that's what I hope, and that's what I want for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and when it's more prevalent and when it's more out there, people when they feel like they're not alone, it is powerful because then people don't have to feel shame around it. That is what's powerful about celebrities talking about their mental health issues,
Yeah.
because you're like, "Oh wow, if they have it, they have money, they have fame, all of that stuff, then it's probably okay that I have it." And the thing is, it's okay. We all struggle with our stuff. And on that note, if you all are struggling with some stuff, feel
Yeah.
free to reach out to me and to do some one on one work. You can DM me on Facebook or Instagram. You can reach out to me on my website. You can book a free call where we just talk about and see if I can help you. It's free. Conversation is free. I don't charge people to see if it's a good fit to work together.
Yeah.
And you can do that at geneabarnes.com, GeneaBarnes.com. And on that note, let's thank you again, Russ, for joining
You're
me for
welcome.
this
Yeah. My
recap.
pleasure.
And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and seeing
Absolutely.
how you progress. All right.
Yeah.
Goodbye,
All right.
everybody.